Lakeshore.
Question. Mr. Speaker, we've got students demonstrating on Parliament Hill today, and they know this government has wasted a year. The government's done nothing to improve access to post-secondary education. It's done nothing to help low-income families send their kids to college, and it's done nothing for Aboriginal Canadians seeking access to higher education. Why has this government wasted a year before developing a strategy for investment in post-secondary education?
Honourable Minister of
Mr.
Human
Speaker,
Resources
upon
and
coming
Social
to
Development.
office, this government moved immediately to help students. We introduced a textbook tax credit, Mr. Speaker. We gave a $1,000 apprenticeship grant to people who are going into the trades, Mr. Speaker. We also have moved to remove the tax, the federal tax on bursaries and scholarships. And one thing we're not going to do, Mr. Speaker, is say how much we care on one hand and then cut transfers to the provinces by $25 billion like the Liberal Party did when they were in power.
Order. The Honourable. Order. 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 We need to be able to hear the questions and the answers. It's very difficult when everybody's talking at the same time. The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Lakeshore now has
Monsieur le
the floor.
Président, ce gouvernement n'a rien fait au cours de la dernière année pour améliorer la formation en milieu de travail. Les peuples autochtones, les immigrants, les personnes handicapées sont particulièrement touchés par la négligence de ce gouvernement. Combien de temps encore allons-nous attendre une véritable politique nationale sur l'investissement pour la formation au milieu de travail?
Honourable Ministre des Ressources
Well,
humaines.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know where the member has been. This government moved immediately to provide an apprenticeship grant, Mr. Speaker, to people going into the trades. We moved to provide a tax credit to employers who hire apprentices, Mr. Speaker, and the member speaks about immigrants. This government introduced $307 million in programming for settlement services to help immigrants adjust to this country, helping them to read and write and learn the language, Mr. Speaker, something that government voted against.
Député de Toronto, Danforth.
Monsieur le Président, les étudiants dehors souffrent à cause d'une dette excessive. Au Québec, les libéraux parlent de dégeler les frais de scolarité. C'est la mauvaise direction. Ça, c'est clair. L'NPD a déposé une loi qui garantirait les transferts fédéraux stables et responsables. Et les étudiants ont proposé leur propre solution, comme un système de bourse basé sur leurs besoins. Est-ce que le Premier ministre va entendre l'appel de notre jeunesse? Est-ce qu'il va travailler pour que les frais de scolarité diminuent? Oui ou non?
Très honorable Premier ministre.
Monsieur le Président, le chef du NPD devrait savoir que les frais d'inscription, les frais de scolarité sont déterminés par les politiques des provinces, mais je peux noter, Monsieur le Président, que nous accordons près de 5,4 milliards de dollars chaque année pour l'éducation postsecondaire, y compris nos augmentations pour les crédits d'impôt pour des livres, pour des bourses, des nouveaux fonds pour des prêts pour des étudiants. Nous continuons à donner plus de l'argent aux provinces pour l'éducation postsecondaire.
L'honorable député de Toronto, Danforth.
Well, Mr. Speaker, policies like the textbook tax credit are regressive and are not going to solve the students' problems.
Right.
They're sitting with debt now of $24,000 on average on their shoulders. How did it come about? In the mid-90s, when the Liberals cut the transfer payments, we all know about that, and they transferred the debt to the shoulders of our students. And yet this government has absolutely no plan. They talk about the fiscal imbalance. What about the personal fiscal imbalance that our students are facing now? Why won't the Prime Minister come forward with a plan to restore the funding levels to pre-Liberal levels? That's what we need.
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, this government will spend nearly $5.4 billion this year on post-secondary education, including additional transfers in the form of tax credits for scholarships and for textbooks, including more money for student loans, including more infrastructure into more post-secondary education infrastructure and investments in apprenticeship training, Mr. Speaker. What Canadian students need is some help. What they don't need are unrealistic promises like the federal government freezing provincial tuition fees, which they know full well the federal government can't do.
Honourable member.
Successive federal governments and most provincial governments just don't understand the importance of education. The Mulroney Conservative government began the attack in 1986 when they began cuts and transfer payments to the provinces for post-secondary education. And then they froze the transfers in the late 80s. And then the Martin Liberal government, when the Liberal government came in and Paul Martin was finance minister, they made the Mulroney freezes permanent. And then Mr. Martin, as finance minister, cut $4.6 billion from transfers for post-secondary education, health, and social assistance. The problem today is not a lack of money. In the late 1990s, the Martin government cut $100 billion from taxes for the rich and for corporations. The Harper government has billions for the military, has providing billions in tax cuts. It wants to make up for the money for post-secondary education by forcing us into more and more of a user pay system. They want to shift the burden onto you, on the students and their families to make up for what government should be funding. And as tuition goes up, government funding doesn't go up so that the universities and colleges have more money. It's simply shifting the burden onto you. This is not acceptable, it's not fair, it's not equitable, and it's harming Canada.